Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces, has killed Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas. This is now the Jerusalem Post making this official. This was attacks that took place in the Gaza Strip. Sinwar is the guy who orchestrated October 7th. Sinwar was the absolute hardliner of Hamas, of these terrorists who had no interest in any level of negotiation, no interest in ceasefire, no want whatsoever to try and find a way to put an end to this. Certainly was not interested in giving back hostages and by any stretch of the imagination. Tony Katz Today. Good to be with you. Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army West Point graduate military analyst. You're the first guy I thought of, Mike, because this has been the Israeli target. Sinwar has been target number one, not Ramallah, whose name a little bit eludes me right now. I kind of butchered that, of Hezbollah, not these guys that they were able to get in Tehran who were connected to Hamas, to Hezbollah, to the terrorist organizations that Iran supports, but it was Sinwar. This has been the target, and now the target has been acquired, and Sinwar has been killed. The question is not only how did it happen, now what happens is the big question.
He was always the target, and it was always concerned that he had hostages around him, and they were always going to be very careful. I'm sure he did. But like anything else, Israeli intelligence, which is acting like a superpower right now with regard to what they know and how they operate, you find him in a place where there's obviously no hostages around him, and they take him out. This was the big obstacle towards any kind of settlement with Hamas, because he refused multiple agreements and ceasefire deals in the past. And perhaps now they'll find somebody that says we surrender, and maybe they can move peace forward. He's been in power since 2019, 2017. And there'll be somebody ready to step up and take his place. We'll see what happens.
We have seen from people who step up and take the place of terrorist leadership, they end up getting killed as well. It makes one wonder whether or not there really is somebody to fall in place, or does this lead to further disarray? But does this lead, Major Lyons, to the idea of Hamas saying, you know what, give back the hostages, let's try and survive, because now we've truly, from an operational standpoint, been gutted?
I think this is Israel's hope at this point. It shows the world that that's what it's going to do. The world, likely in the United States, is going to put pressure on Israel to try to do this, to try to get some other solution, to get a ceasefire. Once the hostages are released, then Hamas has lost all of their leverage from that perspective. You look at a historical analogy. You look at the Irish Republican Army. The IRA went from a terrorist organization to a political party in our lifetimes. No one thought that would happen. Perhaps that could happen now. Perhaps Hamas can become a political party in Gaza that doesn't lead from a terrorist perspective, and they can get to this eventual two-state solution, which they agree, which was what the world would like to see. But again, we just have to see who's going to step up and take his place, because if the next guy comes in, I guess this guy, Al-Arori, he's the deputy right now, works in the West Bank operations. If he comes in and says, we continue the fight, then it just, he becomes the next guy with a number on his head.
And the very idea of two-state solution is very much a left-leaning concept, as opposed to a practicality that the Israelis are down for. Talking to Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army West Point graduate military analyst. Yes, the hostages are the only leverage that Hamas has. How much, though, is that leverage based on the idea that Sinwar was simply absolutely in every way unwilling to negotiate, didn't care what happened to the people, didn't care what happened possibly to himself, even though he spent a lot of time hidden, or certainly to Hamas fighters? These other Hamas fighters have to realize that everybody can be killed, and very often that leads to, well, maybe we can be done here. You say the pressure is on Israel. My question is, can the pressure now be on Hamas and Iran to release the hostages and stop this madness?
The problem is this terrorist state that exists in the world since, really 9/11. They are allowed to propagate mostly on aspiration, and that's the thing that could happen here. This could turn the other direction his death could also inspire the current group to continue to fighting. Now, I'm not one that says that we're going to have this new generation of terrorists. I don't go there. I think we have to solve the problem in today's world. But there's no question that when he is killed, that there's now orders to there's a plan for that. So people are on their side are figuring out what that's going to be. They're going to have to change their mind. But from an inspirational perspective, he still has that grip over Hamas fighters. The question is, the second deputy comes in and says, look, okay, we're not going to put our arms down. We're going to negotiate. We're going to live to fight another day. That's what it's going to take. But if no words come out, I hate to say it, you're still going to see the continuation of the fighting there.
The continuation of the fighting, if taking out the leader and very much a symbolic leader of Hamas isn't going to stop it, isn't that actually, I get your point, right? It could lead to a further entrenchment from those Hamas fighters, and this is their last stand, and it's nothing else to live for, and right. And it reminds you of the Japanese in World War II. I'm forgetting the name of the island now, but if that is indeed the case, which I'm not saying isn't possible, sir, I think you bring up a solid point. Doesn't Israel then have the ability to say, do you see, world? They won't stop. They have to be stopped, because they will not stop, because everything you desire about two-state solution and stop harming children and everything else you may claim to is meaningless, because they won't stop and they have to be ended. So let's end them. Isn't that the if they don't do X, this is the position now?
Oh, I think so. And I think the United States will be more supportive of Israel. I don't think you're going to see the red lines giving to our allies like we've seen in the past. As we get closer to election days, I mean, think about it. We had the B-2s fly over Yemen and destroy the Houthis. I mean, we're now telling Iran, we're sending them different signals than we'd sent them in the past. We're now telling them you better be serious. I do think that this administration is going to give Israel much more of a green light to finish this, to your point. So now is the time. I mean, this is the generational time right now for Israel to go after the Iranian nuclear capability as well. I'd like to see us support that operation if we could possibly do that. But I think Israel will stay for like a hot minute to the side and see and let the world check this out. But I think they still move forward until they're sure they can find someone that says we surrender.
Let me, while I've got you moving into two subjects here, and I'm certainly not done with the Israel subject, and maybe I should ask before we move on. You're Iran. You've been supporting these proxies. You talk about creating a different situation, a conversation with Iran. You see what Israel has done to Hezbollah. You see what Israel has done to Hamas. And you know that Israel has the ability to get you into Iran. They've got bombs planted in the buildings that you just built. You're the Ayatollah. Do you have a new tactic?
Well, we've just not seen Iran back down. A lot of it has to do with they've spent the last 10 or 15 years building this operation up in Hezbollah and in Hamas, this defensive layer, and harassing, using them to fight Israel by proxy. That's been stripped away now, so the calculus could be changed. Now, we also saw that insiders in Iran are trying to get the Ayatollah to release the fatwa that said that they were not going to develop nuclear weapons. We all know that they're doing that anyway. Yes. Which is why, so from a practicality perspective, I mean, again, if the world lets the Iranians get a nuclear weapon, it's shame on us for the whole world's sake. Look what happened in North Korea under the Clinton administration, right under our nose. They let the North Koreans have it. You have Saudi Arabia. I think the Middle Eastern countries want Israel to do this. They want them to take care of this. There's this schism that obviously exists between Shia and Sunni. There's a reformation that's taking place in the Middle East that we seem to ignore as well. Israel's right there in the middle of it, and now's the time. This is a generational opportunity to go take care of that. The Reformation
has nothing to do with the Ayatollah. I mean, if we want to argue somehow there's going to be a coming together of Iran and Saudi Arabia and Sunni and Shia Muslims, that's fantasy, sir.
Yeah, I see the fact that the Saudis want the Iranians knocked down. I don't think that the Saudis envision themselves there with MBS. They figure themselves the forward hegemonic power within the Middle East. We've seen, in our lifetimes, the Syrian army has been destroyed. The Jordanians are well aligned with Israel. We pay Egypt enough money not to attack. They're not any military capability. So there's no other military capability. Iraq's been destroyed. So Saudi Arabia now can launch for the next 100 years and be this hegemonic power. Their threat is the Iranians. And if that threat is taken out by Israel, then good for Saudi Arabia.
And while an ally, certainly an ally, still one needs to keep an eye on. Talking to Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army military analyst. We spoke yesterday based on a Wall Street Journal piece, sir, about these drones that have been buzzing these bases. These drones that no one seems to know exactly where they're coming from, but they have the capacity to quite literally exist as docking stations while other drones are flown off of them. Clearly, the Chinese at play here, and zero response from the Biden-Harris administration. To the extent that you know anything about this, what are you hearing about these drones and why there hasn't been movement from the military to literally shoot them out of the sky?
So from on our side, that might transcend a kinetic response. That could be EMP. It could be other ways. Lasers, for example.
Wouldn't matter how you did it. I'm not saying you have to go pew pew. You feel free to use the EMP, but we haven't done that either.
Well, Tony, a lot of it has to do with keeping our cards to our chest, knowing if we do that, then we show that capability. I think that's. We don't want to expose that until we absolutely have to, because as the future of warfare becomes drones, I think what's happening in the back is this kind of chess match on creativity of how drones get deployed. If they swarm, if they're used as a diversion, it's creating a whole nother, kind of theater and a whole nother set of ways to wage warfare. You have Elon Musk. Number one thing he says, the future of warfare is drones and AI, to the point where it's going to be too lethal for people to be anywhere near where the front lines are going to be. It's going to be machines. It's going to be like out of a Terminator movie. He's already at that spot. So again, a lot of it has to do with, because we don't want to expose what our capability is just yet until we know that it's definitely a threat to us. But as the Chinese deploy swarms of drones, and there's other different ways, I can tell you this: we have creative ways of knocking those drones out of the sky, and they're not one bullet to one drone. It's one to many. It's one to destroy many. Well,
still letting them fly is still a problem, regardless of what we show. There's a question of what it is they're able to see. Before I let you go, Ukraine has been a very quiet conversation, even though they continue to reach deep, or try to reach deep, into Russia. Russia continues to be willing to throw bodies at this, really off the front pages. Is there anything about this conflict that is new, or is this the World War I trench warfare, a foot at a time, in either direction stalemate?
No, same thing. Same as you just said. World War I with no real movement. The Ukraine military moved into Kursk. They still have a foothold there, while Russia tries to counteroffensive. Neither side can accomplish their maximalist objectives using their military. Ukraine can't eject Russia from Ukraine, and Russia can't invade Ukraine and take over the country. So the settlement's going to be, we saw Zelensky come out and say that we will either be in NATO or we're going to develop our own nuclear weapons. That's interesting. Ukraine probably could do that. They probably have the smarts. They could mine uranium. They could likely come up with that. They could be a country that does that. And so we see the new NATO General Secretary saying that Ukraine will be part of NATO. We know that creates conflict with Russia. Yes. I think with this, we have to negotiate this pretty quickly. But the bottom line is they're going to lose. Ukraine likely loses landmass. If I'm Ukraine, I'm trying to get as much landmass along the Black Sea as I can back. They've lost 95% of it. They only have that one city, Odessa, left. They need more of it. But likely those areas in the Donbass and the southern eastern portions of the country get annexed over to Russia. We create a DMZ between them and Russia, and we have North Korea, South Korea all over again.
Mike Lyons, Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army military analyst. More is coming up. I'm Tony Katz. This is Tony Katz Today.